Hello, and welcome to the ODE Oregon Farm to School Competitive Procurement Grant webinar. The webinar will begin shortly. Please keep your line muted. If you wish to ask questions, please use the chat feature and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation as time allows. All questions in the chat log will be addressed and posted on the Farm to School webpage along with this webinar. Welcome to the Farm to School Competitive Procurement Grant Training webinar. I'm your host, Amy Jean Williams. Standing by is Rick Sherman, Farm to School Program Analyst, and Emily Griffith, Farm to School Office Specialist. First, I'd like to quickly review the grant webpage and where to find grant resources. All materials, including this recorded webinar, can be found on the ODE Farm to School website at this bit.ly address. When you get to the ODE Farm to School website, the Oregon Farm to School grant hyperlink at the top of the page will take you to the grant webpage. Once you reach the grant webpage, scroll down and look on the left-hand side. This is where you will find procurement grant resources, including competitive procurement grant eligibility requirements and application timeline. Keep checking the website for updates as things change. If you haven't already, click on the Join Us link on the grant webpage to sign up for a listserv. This is a requirement to participate in any ODE Farm to School grants, and we suggest anyone involved with your district or organization's farm to school business get signed up on our listserv, as it is our preferred method to communicate with the field. It is a good idea to periodically check the website for updates as things change. Some quick housekeeping items. As of the beginning of this biennium, there's a new email address for the Farm to School team. This inbox is monitored by all three of us, farm2cnp@ode.state.or.us. You can still email us individually, rick.sherman@state.or.us, amy.williams@state.or.us, and emilygriffith@state.or.us. This grant is retroactive and applies to school years 2019-2020 and 2020-2021, ending June 30th, 2021. Throughout this presentation, the competitive procurement grant will be referred to as the CPG for simplicity. In today's training, we will cover an overview of the CPG, eligibility requirements, the application process, the grant timeline, and reporting requirements. For questions, please put these in the chat and we will address as many as time allows at the end of this webinar. If we do not get to your questions, don't worry, we will address all questions and post a Q&A document under Competitive Procurement Grant Resources on the Farm to School Grant webpage along with this recorded webinar. First, it is important to note that the CPG is an extension of the non-competitive Farm to School grant. The exact same claim procedure is used, as well as the same allowable and unallowable procedures. Please note, all of the information we are about to cover on the remaining overview slides is available on the CPG overview document. You can find this document on the Farm to School Grant webpage under Competitive Procurement Grant Resources. Please review that document prior to filling out the CPG application. So why are we doing this? The purpose of the Competitive Procurement Grant is to encourage and sustain successful efforts to purchase or promote Oregon foods. The intent is to incentivize the healthiest, most impactful purchases. We'll talk more about this on the next slide. Another reason for the CPG is that it is our legal method of funds reallocation. In the past, we were able to take unspent non-competitive procurement grant funds and reallocate them to other sponsors who had exhausted their original awards using a very informal process. It has been brought to our attention that we are no longer able to use this informal process, thus the development of the CPG. Now the unspent funds are added to the CPG pot and dispersed using a more formal application process. We need to ensure that all farm-to-school procurement grant funds are spent by the June 30th deadline. If you're a current farm-to-school sponsor, you are aware that we require what we call adequate progress to be demonstrated throughout the grant cycle. A few times throughout the biennium, we reduce or liquidate funds from sponsors who are not meeting or have determined they will not meet the adequate progress spending requirement. Let's talk more about the intent of the CPG. The main goal and intent of the CPG is to increase farm-to-school sponsors' innovative purchasing of Oregon-grown and processed foods using the following preferential factors. By increasing purchases of foods produced or processed in the state of Oregon, by purchasing foods produced or processed in the state of Oregon by a federally recognized Indian tribe or Native American-owned business, by implementing a plan for incorporating culturally relevant foods produced or processed in the state of Oregon into its menu, by purchasing foods produced or processed in the state of Oregon by producers or processors that have been certified in a specific production or management practice, such as fair trade, sustainability, or animal welfare. By developing new commercial relationships with producers or processors of foods produced or processed in the state of Oregon that have been certified as disadvantaged business enterprises, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, businesses owned by a service-disabled veteran, or emerging small businesses under ORS 200.005. Healthful foods, as in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and minimally processed beans and legumes, will be incorporated into school meal offerings. Purchasing intent made directly with producers or processors rather than distributors, and Oregon products that have had historically low sales in school meals like pork, poultry, beef, seafood, and eggs. It is important to note that the rules and laws that govern ODE in this effort make it so that we cannot award this grant solely on the factors in goal number 2, as this would be too restrictive. However, we can allow a preferential point system to award funds. Here is an example of how the above table works. If School District A exhausts their initial non-competitive award of $15,000, they are then eligible to apply for a CPG award. If School District A chooses to apply without completing the preferential points section, they could receive $2,000 as a base award amount just for applying, provided there are funds to award. If School District A chooses to complete the entire application, they could be awarded additional funds in the amount determined by the scoring matrix on the next slide. For example, since School District A received a non-competitive procurement grant in the amount of $15,000, they are eligible for the $2,000 CPG base amount. They then scored 40 preferential points on their application, so they would be awarded $3,200 additional dollars and will receive a new grant agreement in the amount of $5,200 for the competitive procurement grant. This image might be a bit hard to read, but it can also be found on the CPG overview document. It's important to note you may request less than the amount you qualify to receive if you feel you will not be able to exhaust the total amount by the June 30th deadline. Let's move on to eligibility requirements. Who is eligible to receive competitive procurement grant funds? Anyone who received a non-competitive procurement grant award this biennium and has a zero balance is eligible to receive CPG funds. The zero balance may either be from spending your entire initial award, or it can be due to liquidation during the state budget cuts in August. Who is not eligible to receive competitive procurement grant funds? Unfortunately, due to a legal issue with our rules, we cannot offer this to charter schools at this time. We plan to rectify this situation by next biennium. Now for the application process. To apply, you will need to download the materials from the Farm to School Grant webpage and read them carefully. Complete the application. The RFA Attachment B producer list is optional. The application asks that you list any plans to purchase from many different types of producers like women-owned, minority-owned, producers using fair trade practices, etc. There are currently no government listings identifying these types of businesses. We hope to discover them through this process. Since there is no formal registry, a self-certification through the RFA Attachment B producer list will help us track these businesses. To get help with this, you can visit the Farm to School webpage and click on the Oregon Regional Procurement Hubs link. There are people that are well aware of this grant standing by to help you succeed. Here is the timeline for the CPG. You can also find this listed on the RFA on the Farm to School Grant webpage. These are some important dates to remember regarding any Farm to School funds you receive this biennium. June 30th, 2021. All funds must be spent and all products must be received. 45 days after that date, all funds must be processed in EGMs. Funds will be liquidated after this date. September 30th, 2021, the final report is due. This is a requirement of the Farm to School Procurement Grant. We will review this on the next slide. As an extension of the non-competitive grant, the reporting requirements are the same, with a question or two added to the final report. As always, sponsors will not be awarded funds the following biennium until the final report is submitted. Time for questions. Again, we will address as many questions in the chat as we can right now, and any we don't get to will be added to the Q&A document that will be available on the Farm to School Grant webpage. You may also reach out to any of us anytime at the email addresses listed. Thank you for joining our webinar.